Hello and welcome to another Photoshop tutorial with Steve, and in this video we're going to talk about brushes in Photoshop. This is going to be a basic overview of how to use brushes, some of the common settings that you can use, how to change your brushes, and kind of where to find all the things you need to know to use them effectively. This video is for people who have not really used brushes much before. If you're looking for more advanced tutorials, this probably is not the one for you, but you can still watch because you'll probably pick up a few things here and there. So without further ado, let's jump into the tutorial. So we're going to go first open up a new canvas. And to do that, I'm going to hit Control N on a PC. That would be Command N on a Mac, N as in Nancy. And it's going to bring up this new document pane. I already have a 1280 by 720 custom one in here, so I'll just use that. Just double click and it'll open up in a new tab up here. And then I'm going to expand my panels over here so I can see my layer. And you can see this is just a blank white background. What I'm going to do to make the demonstration easier and the practicing easier is just go down to here and hit the new layer button, and I'm going to hit it several times, like 5 times. You could also say Control J, and that'll make a copy of that one if you wanted to make a bunch of them like that. But then what we're going to do is we're going to click on the first layer, and I'm going to do some demoing of various brushes and brush techniques, and then I'll hide that layer and go to the next one, so I can show you a bunch of things without having to undo and all that. It's basically just practicing at non-destructive editing. So the first thing you need to know about the brush tool is where it's located. It's right here. If you right click on the brush tool, you'll see there's also the pencil tool, color replacement tool, and the mixer brush tool, but we're going to go with the brush tool right there. You'll notice it also has the shortcut B. So if you just hit the B key, it'll open up the brush tool. So we're on the brush tool, and you'll notice now there's this little dot. That's our brush. When you click on the brush tool, you get a new option bar that comes up here, and this is all of your brush settings. Well, not all of them, but quite a few of the ones that you'll use regularly. The first thing you'll see is up here, there's a presets. We're not going to worry about that. Pretty much ignore that for now. When you click up here, it drops down a menu that has some really important things for you. So the first one is size, and actually I need to pick on a different brush so I can give you a better example here. Okay, so I'm on a hard round brush. That's just basically a basic brush, pretty straightforward. But you'll notice up here the size is right here, and that you can look at it in pixels, or you can use the slider like that. So if I'm way down here, say 44 pixels, you'll see this is my brush. And if I'm way up here at 464 pixels, then you'll see that this is my brush. So you can adjust your size. We'll just go with the medium size for now. And then the hardness is how soft or blurry the edges are. And you can see an example with these two guys right here. You have this soft round brush. You can see the fuzz on the edges, the blur. And then you have a hard round brush. You can see it's very sharp edges. And you can pick on either of these and you can change it to suit you better. It's not going to show up in there, but it'll show up when you paint. So let's go with a soft brush and kind of medium size, well, kind of smallish. And then you can either hit enter to get rid of this dialog window, or you can just click somewhere else. So now I have a little brush, and I'm just going to draw with it or paint with it. Okay, and you'll notice I got a kind of softish blur on the edges, and then you can see the size pretty much matches the tool, and then you'll also notice that the color is kind of reddish brown. That has to do with our foreground and background colors here, and if you're familiar with these, this is the foreground color. That's basically the color that you'll be using regularly, and the background color is kind of like your additional color that you can switch back and forth and also use. So there are some things you can do to customize this to get your colors right, and that's probably the first thing that you'll mess with when you get a brush. The first thing you can do is you can reset these to their defaults, and the defaults are right here. It'd be black in the foreground and white in the background. And you can either click on that, or you can also hit the D key. And you'll notice I hit the D key and it reset to those defaults. You can also switch them back and forth with this little guy right here, or instead of clicking, if you're over here on the canvas, you can hit the X key and you'll notice that it switches them. So now white is the foreground color and black is the background color. So let's see what happens when I toggle back and forth with these and paint. So I'll hit X and that makes my brush black, and if I paint black, I've got black. If I hit X again, that makes white the foreground color, and if I paint with that, I paint in white. Obviously you can't see it right there, but if I go over my black, you'll see I just painted over it with white. Okay, so that's how you switch back and forth, and you go to the defaults. D for default, X to toggle back and forth. Then to actually select colors here, you can double click on this, and you'll notice two things. First, this foreground color picker popped up. Second, if I hover anywhere else on my screen, like over these colors, you'll notice I have a little eyedropper tool. That eyedropper tool allows you to select a color from somewhere on your screen. So if I wanted to get that red color back, I can just hover over it and click, and you'll notice that we have two little boxes here. This is the current color, so my current color is black, right? It's showing black. If I clicked cancel, I'd still be black and my brush would be black. But it's also showing the new color that I've just selected from here, and it's saying, you know, would you like to have that color? You know, if so, click OK. But you'll see I also have a huge range of colors in here. And you can see down the rainbow on the side here, there's these little sliders, and this is where you pick the hue of your color. And so if I scroll up and down this, you'll see I go from reds to yellows to greens to blues, purples, and back to red again. And I won't get into this too much, but just know that you can slide this up and down to get your hue and then pick your color. You can go darker or lighter, you can go brighter or less saturation. So if I wanted a gray color, I just click over here. You see I've got gray. If I want a very bright teal, I click on that. Well, actually, light and bright, go like that. And then when you're ready with your color, you just click OK. Go back to here and click and drag again to paint. Okay, so that's how you pick a color, and that's how you change your color swatches. And again, if I wanted to switch back and forth, I hit the X key and I can paint white back over like that. Hit the X key again, now I'm teal again, and I can paint again with teal. So you can do kind of back and forth. You can work back into your drawings using different colors like that. Another trick that I'll show you before we get too far along is if you hit the Shift key, it does a couple of things. First, if I've already drawn that line right there, I go to another place on my canvas and I hold down Shift and click. It's going to draw a straight line from wherever my last brush stroke ended. So now the last brush stroke ended there. If I go over to here and hit Shift and click, it's going to draw another one, and then I'll go back up to here and Shift and click, and it's going to draw another one. And you'll notice also that those are very straight. Okay, so the same thing applies if you want to draw a straight line. What you do is you click and then hold down the Shift key and you drag in the direction that you want to draw, and you notice even if I go up or down, it's drawing a straight line. And I can just create a thick line like that. Keep going if you want, whatever. But the point is, it gives you a nice straight line. Okay, let me hide this layer now, and we'll start on a new layer so I can do some more examples for you. Up here in the option bar, you have a couple of really important settings. Obviously, we looked at this one where you can adjust the size and the hardness. That's something you'll be using a lot. Oh, one other thing I should tell you about while we're here is you have collections of brushes here. If I minimize that, you'll notice there are 4 categories: general brushes, dry media brushes, wet media brushes, and special effects brushes. And so if you drop any of these down, obviously general is what it sounds like it's going to be. It's pretty much basic brushes. Simple brushes. One thing you'll notice is this is a soft round. This is a soft round pressure brush. And the difference is that if you're using a drawing tablet, then how hard you push with your tablet will affect how the image looks or how the brush stroke looks, which is really cool. And you notice there are quite a few of these. If you're just using a mouse, then these won't do anything special. But you can see that's all of those. Then we minimize that one and we'll look at the dry media brushes. And these are all just set defaults for you that you can use. So you have like a pencil, and I'll show you that real quick just so you can see what it looks like. Oh, I have to make sure that I'm selected on the correct layer. So I hid that last layer. I'm going to select on the current layer. If you are selected on a hidden layer, notice the little Ghostbuster symbol. It's saying I can't draw on a hidden layer. So I have to select on the next layer. And then now I just have a little pencil, and I'll draw with that. And you'll notice it's a little rougher. If I zoom in, you can see the texture of it. See, it's just a little rough. But this would be for if you want to do just a regular pencil drawing, and you can change the size on the pencil as well. You can either go up here to change it, or you can just use a shortcut, and this works for all the brushes. In fact, most tools in Photoshop. You use the right square bracket key, and if you do that, then it makes it bigger, and then you can draw a really aggressive pencil line. That would be a very big pencil. But if you push on the left square brackets, you notice it gets smaller, and you can go back to your kind of drawing. So that's a pencil brush. Oops, wrong button. You have other things like charcoals, chunky charcoals. I recommend going in and playing with these, and I'll just show you some more demonstrations. But these are some other things that you can do, effects with the brushes. And I'll close that and show you the other ones. You have wet media, so you have like, this would be like more like almost like watercolor brushes and oil brushes. And I'll just demo one of these real quick. That almost looks like a house painting brush. Minimize that, and then finally you have special effects brushes, and these are good for doing like splatters and backgrounds and various things like that. Just kind of fun stuff here. We'll do the foliage mix here. You can see the brush outline, it's got leaves on it, so if you just do a one click, then it just throws the leaves up there like that. And you can also go like drag it and just explosion of leaves like that. So these are all default preset brushes that you have access to with Photoshop. You can change the size right here if you want to see more packed in there, or if you need to really get a close-up on the brush. Usually leave that somewhere in the middle. And then let's close out of that, and I want to show you some of these other presets. Actually, let me put it on a more reasonable brush first. Just put it on a round brush. Okay. Now let's go back to the option bar up here. Okay, so now I want to show you some of the options up here, but when I went into that foliage brush tool, it actually changed my tool. You'll notice, so I'm going to click on that. You see it's now called a mixer brush, which just simulates real painting techniques. So I need to go back and reset that to my regular brush tool, and that's going to get me just my regular brush. And then I want to talk to you about the options up here. So we already looked at how to change the size and hardness and the actual brush. We can close out of that. This just brings up the brush settings panel. So if I click that, then it pops up here, which is really nice because you can get into all kinds of settings here. We're not going to talk too much about this in this video, but that's something we can hopefully get into in a later video if you're interested. Click that again to get rid of it. Your mode, you have some options here, which if you've ever done blending modes, this kind of works similar to that. It's how your brush stroke and your paint will interact with the layers behind it. Okay, we won't get too deep into that either because we're just going with the basics here, and the important stuff you need to know is right here. So the first thing is the opacity, and this is how opaque your brush stroke will be, or in other words, how much color will show up. And I'm going to hide this layer, and I'm going to go to a new layer to demonstrate this. first I'm going to go to a regular hard round brush. That'll just make it easier to show you. I can make that a little bit bigger with the right square bracket, and then I'll just left click and paint. And you notice that that's a very thick color. You cannot see through it. But let's go change the opacity down to 50%. You can just click and drag, or you can also just hit the 5 key and that'll change it to 50%. And then I'm going to click and drag with that. You'll notice it's not as thick. It's at about half the opacity as the one above it. You'll notice, however, if I left click and drag over that layer, that now the center part is getting darker, and so it's overlapping with itself. And if I continue to do this, then it will just keep getting darker and darker until it matches the same opacity as that. But you can see all the other layers on here as well. So that's basically what opacity does, and the reason opacity is important is because you can blend things together with it really well. So for example, if I took another color, I'm going to hit the X on my keyboard and double click on this to change it to another color. Let's just go with like this lime green. What I'll do is I'm going to do 100% opacity. I'm going to paint a line right above this one, and then I'm going to blend, well actually I'm going to paint a couple lines, and then I'm going to blend these two together. So I'll hit X again to change back to the blue color, and I'm going to paint those right next to each other, and then to blend them in, you can play with the opacity. So if I hit the 5 key again and go to 50% opacity, actually let's go to like 40% opacity. And I'm on the blue color, so I go up into the green color and I paint a layer over it. And see how now they're starting to blend. And then I hit the X key to toggle back to the lime green color. And again, with this 40% opacity, I'm going to draw down here and I'm going to get these to start overlapping. Oops, I'm not doing a very good job of drawing. There we go. There we go. And now I'm going to actually do another trick where I use the Alt key. And you'll notice when I hold down the Alt key or Option on a Mac, it's got a color picker, so I can pick the color that I want. So instead of using one of the two original bright colors, I'm going to use one of these already blended colors. I'm going to use this guy. Now I've got a blended color, and I'm going to keep layering it on like this. So when I paint with that one, you can see it's blending it a little bit more even. I can go back here and pick this color, and I can do it down the middle. And then I can go back up here and click this lighter color and blend these. And this is usually a hard brush too. If I use a softer brush, it would go a lot better. Do a little bit more here. Just blending it. Okay, so that's kind of a quick and dirty example, but you can see the power of what's happening there. If you're wanting to do artistic painting and do shading and contrast and all those things, being able to layer the brushes using opacity is huge. Okay, similar to opacity is flow. And one thing I'll show you about opacity is that every time you click and draw, that's one layer of 40%. But if I go back and forth over it while still holding down the button or holding my stylus down, it's not going to get any more opaque. It's going to stay at that same opacity. Okay? If I release the mouse and then I click again and drag, then it's going to get one layer darker. But it's only going to be one layer darker. And I can keep clicking and dragging to make it darker, but I have to release and click again to make it darker. That's kind of how opacity works. Now let's go to 100% on opacity and let's go to 40% on flow, and I'll tell you about that. But rather than adjusting that with the dragger, the slider, let's go use a shortcut, and that's the Shift key. So you do Shift and the number 4, and that'll make it 40% flow. Now here's the basic difference between flow and opacity. And actually, to demonstrate this, I need to turn the flow down even further. So I'm going to hit Shift 1 on my keyboard. That changes the flow to 10%. And then I'm going to just click and hold, and I'm going to brush. And you can see, well, it's a little hard to see actually even at this level. Let me go a little lower. I'm going to go Shift 05 to do 5%. And then when you see, okay, now you can see it. So I'm holding down the button, but as I paint, you can see the layers kind of build on top of each other. And if I go up, you can see it kind of continues to build the layers. And so with flow, if you set the flow really low, and you can see around the edges, you can get kind of more of a feathery effect. Whereas with opacity, you get still pretty much sharp, kind of digitized edges. And I'll do that with the flow even lower. Let's just grab this and drop it to like 1%. And I'll go nice and slow. And so it's only flowing out of my brush at 1% of its full capacity. And so you can see it's kind of overlapping. And I'm not letting go of the brush. And as I go back up, you see it thickens the layers. And it's going to go up to 100% opacity, but very slowly and gradually. And you see how feathery that is? Okay, so that's the difference between opacity and flow, and those are really important. A lot of the time, to be honest, you'll probably leave the flow at 100%, and you'll just bring the opacity down so that you can start with a thinner coat. But remember flow, and remember that it can be significant and helpful. Okay. The other thing, which I'll just touch briefly on, is smoothing. If you have smoothing set really low and you draw a line and you're kind of rough about it, it's going to go like that. It's going to be a little jagged. If you have smoothing cranked all the way up and you draw a jagged line, it's going to basically like slow you down and it's going to smooth it out. Let me see if I can do a better example. Here, let's close that one. Get a new one. Okay, so this is kind of my rough line with smoothing cranked up, and without smoothing, that's a little bit more what it looks like. So you can just see it kind of evens things out a little bit. It also moves slower though, so it kind of lags behind, as you probably noticed. So you can use smoothing if you want to, like if you're doing handwriting, like I'm writing my name, right? If I do it like this, it's going to be a little rough looking. But if I go to a, here, let's do another new layer. Why not? Okay, so we'll do one without smoothing. And then we'll do one with smoothing. See how it like lags because it's spending this time like straightening out my strokes. You can just see a slight difference. You see the little shutters and jaggedness where I shook, but this one's nice and smooth. And it takes a little practice to get good at using smoothing because of that lag behind your tool, but it's a good one to use. Okay, so that's really the basic overview of brushes. I hope that helped you. What we looked at was the brushes, how to get on the brush itself, how to make some adjustments to size and hardness. We looked at the different presets, the different groupings of brushes that you can use in here. We looked at the opacity versus the flow. And if we go back into a couple of these back here, we looked at how to feather it using flow. We looked at how to blend, how to select colors with your color picker, and in the color picker window, we looked at different brush textures and sizes, and even like these wet brushes where you can do patterns. And then at the very beginning, we talked about how just to go back and forth between your lights and darks, how to reset this by hitting D, how to flip them by hitting X so you can work back and forth between colors, and then how to hold down the Shift key so that you can draw straight lines and lines that connect to the end of the last brush stroke that you did. So that's brushes. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this or learned something from it, please hit like or subscribe to the channel. Come back and watch some more videos or check out the ones that show up in the end screen here. And be sure to check out my complete Photoshop course for beginners in the description below. I'd love to have you join that, and I will teach you all kinds of awesome Photoshop stuff. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.